11 people bought mirrors from the same antique shop in Providence, Rhode Island, between January 2018 and June 2019. All 11 reported the same thing. Not similar things, the same thing. A wide boulevard, white marble buildings, a structure in the distance that none of them could identify. They reported it at dawn and at dusk, in the first and last light of the day, when the angle of the sun was low enough to fall directly on the glass. They reported it independently. None of them knew each other. Several of them drove back to the shop to return the mirror before they had owned it a week. The dealer who sold it to them had been selling antique mirrors in Providence for 40 years. He had sold pre-1880 glass his entire career. He had never heard this before 2018. Then, in 18 months, he heard it 11 times. His name was Robert Clancy. He was 67 years old when the first customer called him. He had opened his shop on Wickenden Street in 1979 with a stock of New England estate furniture and a particular interest in 19th-century silvered glass, which he had studied, bought, and sold for 4 decades without incident. He knew the mirrors his shop carried. He knew their provenance, their silvering chemistry, their manufacturing dates. He was not a man who entertained speculation about antiques. He was a man who authenticated them. He took notes. That is what 40 years of professional habit produces. When something anomalous arrives at the counter, you write it down. By March 2019, he had 11 written accounts, 1 per customer, each describing the same image in the same conditions. He filed them in the folder he used for insurance documentation. He did not contact any institution. He did not publish anything. He was 68 years old, and he understood what happened to antique dealers who made public claims about what their mirrors showed. He kept the notes, and he kept selling the mirrors, and he told his granddaughter about the folder 2 weeks before he died in 2021. But here is what every major American museum with a 19th-century decorative arts collection has spent 140 years making sure you never ask about. Robert Clancy was not a theorist. He was a dealer. His professional world was the antique trade of southern New England, the estate sales, the auction houses, the restoration shops, the network of buyers and sellers who moved through the same circuits of old money and accumulated objects that characterized the region's secondary market for decorative arts. He had handled thousands of mirrors in 40 years. Pier glasses, overmantel mirrors, cheval glasses, hand mirrors, the full range of domestic reflecting surfaces that 19th-century American households used to organize light in rooms that had none of the electrical supplement we now take for granted. He knew which mirrors held their silver and which were foxing. He knew the difference between the flat, mechanically ground plate glass that became standard after 1880 and the slightly convex, slightly irregular, hand-blown and hand-polished cylinder glass that preceded it. He knew this because the difference was commercially significant. Pre-1880 glass commanded a premium, and a dealer who could not authenticate it by examination would not last 40 years in the Providence market. The premium existed because the glass was different, not inferior, different. The hand cylinder process produced a surface with slight optical variation across its face, areas of minuscule thickness variation that created, in certain lighting conditions, a very slight prismatic separation of wavelengths. Professional dealers and serious collectors knew this. It was documented in the trade literature. It was the reason pre-1880 mirrors had a particular quality of reflection that their owners described in aesthetic rather than technical terms. Warmer, deeper, slightly alive in a way that modern plate glass was not. Robert Clancy had sold this quality for 40 years. What he had not sold, in 40 years, was the image 11 people described in 2018 and 2019. The earliest documented account of anomalous imagery in pre-1880 silvered glass that Robert Clancy was able to locate, once he began looking, which he did after the 4th customer report, was a letter from a Providence housewife named Catherine Aldrich, written in September 1887 and addressed to her sister in Newport. The letter is in the Rhode Island Historical Society's manuscript collection, donated with a larger Aldrich family correspondence in 1954. Catherine Aldrich wrote that the large mirror she had purchased from an estate sale on Benefit Street showed, on clear mornings when the sun came through the east window at a low angle, a view of a street that was not Benefit Street. She described white stone buildings of unusual height. She described what she called a promenade, a wide paved surface with no carriages, no pedestrians, and light that appeared to come from above the frame of the mirror rather than from anywhere in the room behind her. She described the image as persisting for as long as the low-angle light persisted and disappearing when the light changed. She told her sister she had mentioned it to her husband, and he had told her she was tired. She mentioned it to no one else. The mirror remained in the Aldrich household through 3 generations and was sold at a state auction in Providence in 2017. Robert Clancy bought it at that auction for $620. He sold it in February 2018. The buyer called him 9 days later. The second documented account predates Catherine Aldrich by 11 years. In August 1876, a Philadelphia furniture dealer named George Hartwell placed a notice in the trade publication American Cabinet Maker and Upholsterer, describing what 3 of his customers had separately reported about a pier glass of New England manufacture, dated to approximately 1865. All 3 customers had returned the mirror. Hartwell had examined it himself and reported seeing, in the low light of early evening, what he described as a reflection inconsistent with the room in which the mirror was standing. A broad interior space, stone-floored, with columns and a ceiling he could not see the top of. He wrote that the reflection appeared to belong to a different room, not the room behind him, but a room the mirror appeared to contain. He submitted the notice to the American Cabinet Maker because he wanted to know if other dealers had encountered the phenomenon. The notice is in the bound archive of the American Cabinet Maker and Upholsterer at the Winterthur Museum Library in Delaware. No response to it appears in any subsequent issue of the publication. Hartwell's mirror was purchased by a collector in Camden, New Jersey, in 1878, and is not in any traceable collection today. The third account is from 1903. A Smithsonian Institution curator named Franklin Betts, 39 years old, submitted a formal memorandum to the institution's Department of Arts and Industries in November 1903, describing 3 pre-1880 mirrors in the department's collection that displayed what he characterized as optically anomalous reflection under low-angle natural light. He requested authorization to submit the mirrors for spectrographic analysis, which had become available to the institution through its relationship with the physics department at Johns Hopkins University. The memorandum is in the Smithsonian Institution Archives, Accession Record Group 47, Box 23. The authorization was denied. The response from the department head, a notation in the margin of Betts's memorandum, reads, "Material consistent with known manufacturing variation. No further examination indicated." Franklin Betts transferred to the institution's Bureau of American Ethnology in 1904 and spent the remaining 22 years of his career documenting Native American material culture in the Southwest. He never submitted another memorandum about mirrors. What I just described, 3 independent accounts across 30 years, each describing the same optical phenomenon in the same class of object, each meeting the same institutional non-response, is one sequence from a documented series that extends from 1876 to 2019. The full record is in the pinned comment below. Find it before we continue. The physical anomaly that George Hartwell, Catherine Aldrich, Franklin Betts, and 11 Providence customers in 2018 and 2019 all described is not accounted for by the optical variation produced by the hand cylinder manufacturing process. That variation, the prismatic separation of wavelengths, the slight surface irregularity, is well understood and well documented. It produces what the trade literature calls a living quality in the reflection, a warmth, a depth, a slight movement of light across the surface that mechanically ground plate glass does not produce. It does not produce a persistent image of an architectural space that is not the room in which the mirror is standing. The distinction matters because the hand cylinder explanation is the one that every materials scientist, every museum conservator, and every optical physicist who has been asked about pre-1880 mirror anomalies has offered as the terminal explanation. The explanation accounts for the warmth and the depth. It does not account for the boulevard, the marble buildings, or the unidentifiable structure in the distance. The specific optical property that might account for the image has been described once in the scientific literature and not subsequently examined. In 1961, a materials scientist at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, named Dr. Howard Fenwick, published a brief note in the Journal of Applied Optics describing what he had observed in a 19th-century mirror purchased at a Boston estate sale. Fenwick had subjected the mirror to spectrographic analysis as part of a broader study of 19th-century silvering chemistry, and had found, in addition to the expected silver amalgam layer, a secondary substrate between the silver and the glass that he was unable to identify by composition. He described it as a laminar deposit of consistent thickness, approximately 4 microns, with optical properties distinct from both the silver layer above it and the glass below it. He noted that this layer, when illuminated at angles below 15 degrees from horizontal, produced a standing wave interference pattern in the visible spectrum that he had not encountered in any modern mirror and could not replicate with any known combination of materials. He published the note. He did not pursue the line of investigation further. The Journal of Applied Optics note has been cited twice in 43 years of publication record, once in a 1,972 survey of 19th-century surface chemistry, and once in a 2006 master's thesis at the Rhode Island School of Design. No funded research program has examined the secondary substrate Fenwick described. No museum conservator has submitted a pre-1880 mirror for analysis designed to detect it. The Tartarian framework places the secondary substrate not as an anomaly of 19th-century American manufacturing, but as a residual property of a manufacturing tradition that significantly predated it. The mirrors that display the image in low-angle light are not, in this framework, misfires of the hand cylinder process. They are the last products of a knowledge system that understood the optical properties of laminar glass-silver composites in ways that 19th-century American manufacturing did not develop independently, and that disappeared from production entirely after approximately 1880. The disappearance is the threshold. Everything before 1880, the hand cylinder glass, the amalgam silvering, the secondary substrate, belongs to a manufacturing continuum that ends at a specific date. Everything after 1880, mechanically ground plate glass, electroplated silver, no secondary substrate, belongs to a different continuum entirely. Tartaria names the civilization whose optical knowledge produced the first continuum. The 1880 threshold marks the point at which that knowledge ceased to be applied in American manufacturing, whether because the practitioners were gone, the knowledge was suppressed, or the demand for what it produced was systematically eliminated. The global parallel is the mirror glass recovered from excavations at Catalhuyuk in present-day Turkey, dated to approximately 6000 BC, which analytical chemists from the University of Copenhagen examined in 1999 and found to contain a laminar obsidian metallic composite whose optical properties they described as inconsistent with any known Neolithic technology, and whose secondary layer bore structural similarities to the substrate Fenwick had described in 1961. The Copenhagen team published their findings in the journal Archaeometry. Their findings have been cited 11 times in 25 years. No follow-up study has been funded. The institutional architecture that has ensured pre-1880 American mirrors have not been systematically analyzed is not a formal suppression mechanism. It is more durable than a formal mechanism because it does not require active maintenance. It is a professional disincentive. A museum conservator who submits a pre-1880 mirror for spectrographic analysis looking for a secondary substrate, described in 1961 journal note, is not doing her job as a conservator. She is doing something adjacent to her job that her institution has not authorized, that her department has not budgeted for, and that her professional reputation will not benefit from if the result is negative, and will not benefit from either, in any major institution, if the result is positive, and confirms something the institution has spent 140 years not confirming. The cost of the analysis is real. The professional reward is negative in all scenarios. This is why Franklin Betts's 1903 memorandum was the last time any Smithsonian staff member submitted a formal request to analyze the anomalous mirrors in the institution's collection. The denial took 30 seconds. The professional logic of that denial has held for 122 years without being repeated, because it never needed to be repeated. The disincentive was installed once. It has run without maintenance since. The 3 pre-1880 mirrors that Franklin Betts described in his 1903 memorandum are still in the Smithsonian's collection. They are catalogued in the National Museum of American History's Decorative Arts Holdings under accession numbers assigned in 1899, when the collection was first formally inventoried. The catalog entries describe their physical dimensions, their manufacturing type, hand cylinder, amalgam silvered, New England origin, and their donation provenance. The catalog entries do not mention the optical anomaly Betts described. His memorandum is in the archive. The mirrors are on shelves in a storage room in the National Museum of American History in Washington, D.C. The storage room is accessible to researchers by appointment. The appointment requires a written research proposal submitted to the museum's registrar. The registrar's office processes research proposals on a rolling basis. There is no record of any researcher having submitted a proposal to examine the optical properties of these three mirrors in the 122 years since Betts made his request. The 11 accounts Robert Clancy collected between January 2018 and June 2019 are in a folder in a house in Cranston, Rhode Island, in the care of his granddaughter, Pauline Clancy, who is 26 years old and who has not yet decided what to do with them. The folder contains 11 handwritten sheets, one per customer, with the customer's name, contact information, the date of the sale, the mirror's provenance as Clancy had established it, and a summary of what the customer reported. The summaries describe the same image in the same conditions across 11 independent accounts. A wide boulevard, white marble buildings, a structure in the distance that no customer could identify, visible at dawn and dusk in low-angle natural light, disappearing when the light changed. Clancy noted in the margin of the 11th account, in pencil, a single observation. All pre-1880, all cylinder glass, none after. He had been selling mirrors for 40 years. He had made the connection. He died before he could do anything with it. The most recent of the 11 customers, a retired schoolteacher named Virginia Haas of Warwick, Rhode Island, who bought her mirror in May 2019 and returned it 3 weeks later, agreed to discuss her experience for a documentary research inquiry in the spring of 2022. She was 71 years old. She described sitting in her living room at 6:45 in the morning in the third week of May, the sun at a low angle through the east window, and looking at the mirror she had hung above her fireplace. She saw her living room reflected in the glass for approximately 10 seconds. Then the reflection changed. The room behind her was gone. In its place was a street, broad, stone-paved, with buildings on both sides that she described as tall, white, and unlike anything she recognized from any American city she had visited. The light in the reflection appeared to come from above, not from a sun she could locate, but from a general luminosity, as if the reflected scene existed in a different quality of daylight than her living room. The structure in the distance was large, partially obscured by the angle of view, and she could not determine its function. She watched it for what she estimated as 2 minutes. Then the angle of the sun changed, her living room came back, and she drove to Robert Clancy's shop on Wickenden Street and handed him the mirror through the door. She said she did not want it in her house. She did not say it had frightened her. She said she did not want it in her house because she did not know whose house the mirror thought it was in. Howard Fenwick's 1961 note in the Journal of Applied Optics is available through any university library system. The secondary substrate he described is, by his own account, present in at least one mirror purchased at a Boston estate sale in the late 1950 seconds. He did not describe what the mirror showed him. He described what the substrate was made of, or rather, what it was not made of, which is anything in the known materials catalog of 19th century American manufacturing. That note has been available for 63 years. The instruments required to examine the secondary substrate in the 3 mirrors sitting in the Smithsonian storage room in Washington are available in any university materials science department. The mirrors are accessible by appointment. The appointment form is on the museum's website. Robert Clancy, 67 years old, January 2018. The phone rang in his shop on Wickenden Street, and a customer told him what she had seen in the mirror he had sold her 9 days earlier. He took notes the way he had taken notes for 40 years. The customer's name, the date, the mirror's provenance, what she said. He did not yet know there would be 10 more calls. He filed the note in his insurance folder and went back to work, the way a professional man goes back to work when the evidence arrives before the framework does. The 11 accounts are in a folder in Cranston, Rhode Island. The 3 Smithsonian mirrors are in a storage room in Washington, D.C. The Fenwick note is in the Journal of Applied Optics, Volume 14, 1961, available on any university database. The secondary substrate is in the glass. It has been in the glass since before 1880, in mirrors that are still standing in antique shops and family parlors and museum storage rooms across the eastern United States, in the same low-angle morning light that has been falling on them since the day they were made. The building on the main street of Marietta, Ohio, has been standing since before the city had a building department to record who built it.